Hey Dev Team, welcome back to Flutter with Drag. Let's continue with our conference app. So, since the last episode, I have just been doing a little bit in Firebase and I have added a few more fields to our events, as you can see here. And I've added this to now 3 events. I've created a 3rd event as well. And it's all just random data with random images off the internet. So, with that set up, we now need to update our event model, because what I want to do today is achieve this and get our event page working as a sort of list. This is the home page once we've signed in to the app. So let's start by coming to our conf event model, and at the moment we have ID and title. Well, I just need to add in the other little bits first of all. So we're going to have an image, and that's going to be the background image, or the image of the app, the event. We're going to have a start time, which is for now a string. Almost certainly we'll change this to a time later on. And another string, which is going to be the end time, and a string of speakers. And again, that might change to an array of speakers at some point in the future. Coming down to our constructor, let's just regenerate that with all the new bits in it. And now we need to update this from JSON bit. So what we're going to do, as you can see, this conf event g.dart is now showing it's got 8 errors. What we need to do is come to our terminal and run flutter pub run build underscore runner build. And in a second, hopefully, that will regenerate our conf event g.dart file and get rid of those errors for us. Incidentally, if we were doing lots of changes to this file over the course of the episode or over the course of the project, instead of putting build at the end, so instead of putting build there, we can put the word watch, and that will mean it would generate it every time this file changed. I've not done that because I don't think we'll be changing this file again in this episode, so I'm happy with that. Okay. Let's now come to the start of our app, which is the main. Incidentally, the server is running. I have the server running in a second terminal. We don't need to make any changes to the server for the new data. The way I've set it up, all that new data, the speakers, the images, start time, is all going to be sent, and that's fine. Okay, so we can now delete my app in its entirety and recreate it as a stateless widget, my app. And let's get rid of these imports at the top that aren't needed at the moment. Okay, my app is going to still be a material app, and we might put some theme data in here. But for now, during development, I'm going to handle themes and things slightly differently. So I'm going to create a new folder, new file in the lib folder called const.dart. And in it, I'm going to have 2 classes. The first class I'm going to do is going to be called app colors, and I'm going to set up some app colors there. And secondly, I'm going to set up one called app fonts, and I'm going to set up some font styles in there. Now this can all go into theme data later on, but I want to keep it separate and out of the way, just for the development. So first of all, in app colors, I'm going to create a number of constants. So static constants. The first one is going to be primary, which is going to be the primary color of our app. which is 0xff 01569e. I've just taken that off the design, and we need to import there our material package to complete that. So if you're not familiar with this, it's simply the 6-digit hexadecimal value with 2 digits beforehand, FF, talking about the transparency, and the 0x is it specifies it's a hexadecimal number. So it's a hexadecimal, completely opaque in this case. If it was 00, it would be completely transparent, and then the 6-digit hexadecimal number, which you would find in web development, etc., which would normally look something like that. Okay, I'm just going to copy that a few times, and the other colours I'm going to set up are a grey colour, a light grey colour, and a sort of orangey colour. And that grey is going to be 0xff 2c 3941. The light grey is going to be 0xff EE F2 F5, and the orange colour, the hexadecimal part, is going to be F6 5446. Yeah, that looks about right. Okay, so that's our app colours set up. That's all we need for now. Could of course come and add more or change them later on. And then as for the fonts, we'll add those as we go along. Okay, let's come back to our main.dart. And in our material app, I'm going to set debug show checked mode banner to false. I'll get rid of that. And for now, I'm just going to set up the home page as a page we haven't done yet, but it's going to be called home screen. Okay, let's do that. So in our lib folders, I'm going to make a new folder called screens, and I'm going to make a new folder in there called home, and a new file in there called home.dart. And this is going to be a stateless widget, which is our home screen. And let's import a material. Within our screens folder, I'm going to create a new file called index.dart. This is going to be a barrel file, and this is going to export all the screens that we create. So we're going to export home.dart from there. That means when we come back to our main.dart and we try to import it, you can see we can either import it from the conference screens home.dart or from global conference screen index.dart. By choosing index, it means if we load up any other pages, then we've only got the one import rather than listing every single page we've got. We've got some blue squiggly things talking about constant constructors. We'll worry about that later on. For now, let's come to our home. Okay, next thing, we need to install some extensions into our pubspec.yaml. And we're going to install them all immediately and worry about them as we go along. So I'm going to, on VS Code, hit Ctrl-Shift-P and go to PubSpec Assist, add update dependencies. And the dependencies I want to put in now are cached network image, Flutter, block, and equatable. I think that's all we need for this episode. So just hit enter, give it a second, and when I save pubspec.yaml, that should install. So we have cache network image, equatable, and Flutter block. think that's it. If I forget something, we'll come back and we'll add it after. With those new packages installed, I'm just going to stop and rebuild. And we're good to go. Got a blank screen, of course, because we're just returning a container. So let's get on and start fixing some of that. First thing we're going to want is a scaffold, of course, and an app bar. And we'll have an app bar with a title, and the title is going to be the text global conf, and we will also center the title in our app bar. Save that, and there we are. We now have a screen that looks a little bit more readable. Okay, so if you're not familiar with Scaffold and things, a scaffold is basically a widget that has a load of functionality built into it, things that we're going to make use of as the app goes along. Things like the ability to easily put in side drawers, navigation bars, app bars, like we've just done. It's just a lot of code done for us. You could do it all yourself, but let's use widgets that are available. The text isn't going to change, so that needs to be a constant. And we can now continue our build. So we're going to do this. We need to think about what happens when we first load up the app. There is going to be no conferences available loaded. So we're going to have to first make a call to the internet and get a list of all the events within the conference. Then, once that is done, we will be able to process that and display it. That all means we're going to have state. We have to know whether the state of the app has loaded the events or hasn't loaded the events. And we are using stateless widgets here. And stateless widget, as the name suggests, doesn't maintain a state. So we're going to use the block pattern to do this. Now, clicking on our home folder and going to qubit new qubit is what we're going to do, and we're going to store our state in a qubit. And if you haven't got this, then you're going to need an extension. And just pause a second while I pulled it up, and this is the extension in VS Code you're going to need to install. And that will allow you to add new blocks or new qubits. It's block by Felix Angelov. Okay, with that in place, we're going to right click on home and go to qubit new qubit. And a qubit is a sort of cut down version of a block. Blocks are built on qubits, but if you don't need a block, we'll use a qubit. And we're going to call this one home_page. That'll create this qubit for us and these two files. And if you haven't got that extension or you can't get that extension, then you're just going to need to type in this code. It's not much by hand. Okay, so let's start with this one, homepage state.dart. And this is the state. So when the page is loaded, we've got this initial state. And I'm just going to copy that, and I'm going to call this homepage loaded, which will be our loaded state. And in here, we're going to store all the things that we've got available to us and we're maintaining the state of. So for example, one of those things is going to be a list of conference events. And we'll call that events. This needs a constructor, so we'll generate a constructor for it. And the constructor needs to be a const constructor, and that needs to be final, because this is immutable. States are immutable, so this is never going to change. Okay, we're also using this equatable package, and what that does is, equatable package is a lot of code, again, that's been written that takes an object and makes it comparable. It's very difficult to compare objects in Dart. If you create two identical objects, they're not necessarily the same. However, Equatable takes that and it does a comparison between each of the properties. However, for that to work, we need to list all the properties that we want it to compare. And we do that by overriding the getProps getter and listing in there the properties we want it to check. In this case, the only properties we've got are events. So that means the different states it can compare the list of events to see if it's the same, and if they are the same, then the state hasn't changed. If they are different, the state is different. Okay, that's all we need in homepage state. So we can close out of that and come to our homepage qubit. Now in our homepage qubit, we're going to need to load the data from our repository that we did. So we're going to need to have access to that repository. So we're going to need to bring in the conference repository, and we'll call it repo, since it's the only one at the moment. If we need to bring other repositories into here, then we might rename that to something else. Okay, it's a private, so we need to also tell the constructor to expect it in. So we're going to have a conference repository coming in called repo, and then within our initializer we're going to set our private repository to be equal to the repository coming in. We're then going to call the super, so this is to the qubit, and set effectively our state. We're setting our initial state, which is homepage initial. Once that's done, we need to load our events. So let's create a method in here called load events, and this is going to be an async method, and we're going to get here a list of conference events. We'll call events, and that's going to equal the await of our repo get events, just like we did last time. So when load events is called, we're going to call the get events method from our repo, which will get all our events. That will convert it into our list of conference events and store it in events. We then need to emit the new state to let our program node, let our widget know that the state has changed. So we emit the home page loaded event, and we pass to it the list of events. Now the only thing we need to do is call this load event from somewhere, and I'm going to call it from a constructor. So as soon as this qubit is created, it will call load events. That's saying that could be final. It could be final. Let's put final in there. So that's our qubit done. Okay, let's start building this page out then. So we've got this app bar, and now we need to put in a body for our page, and I think we're going to need some padding to start off with, and so I'm going to put that around the whole thing, and I'm just going to put an edge inset all of 16 to create our padding. Padding also takes a child, and the child for this, if we look at our design, we've got a column. At the top of the column we have these date boxes, and then just below that we have the list of the events. So let's put in a column. So the column is going to take some children, and the first thing we're going to put in is this date row. So I'm going to create a new widget called date row. Where is that? Well, we have to create that. So within our home folder, I'm going to create another new folder called widgets. And in there, I'm going to create a new file called dateRow.dart. So, stateless widget called date row. Bring in a material like that. Okay, so what is this date row? Well, it's a row of these boxes of dates. So let's return that. A row. The row is going to have children, and we're going to have boxes of dates. So let's say date box, something like that. And we're going to have 4 of them because in our conference we have 4 events, 4 days of the events. Let's create this date box in the same file. That's fine. It's not going to be used anywhere else, I don't think. So we're going to create a stateless widget. And we're going to call this date box. Right, so a box is going to be a container. We're going to want to have a background color, and we're going to want to round the corners, so we're going to need a decoration here. So let's have a box decoration. The decoration is going to be color app colors.gray. So that's the color we set up at the beginning, one of the colors. And we're going to take a border radius, and we're going to have a border radius circular of 10. Okay, within the container, we want our text to be aligned to the center. So let's set that up, alignment.center. And then we want to have, as the child, a text widget with the date. So let's just put 10 in there for now. And if we save that, we need to import our date row there. Okay, so that's a start. We've got something, but it isn't looking quite as we want. So first of all, we need to set up a text style for this. Now, the question is this text style going to be used anywhere else in the app, or is it only going to be used here? For now, I'm not sure, so I'm going to just set it up here directly. I'm going to set up a text style, and I want the color to be colors.white. I want the font size to be 29. And I'm getting all these numbers from the design that I threw together. And the font weight to be black, which will be font weight 900, W900 even, black, the thickest. That is complaining, but it'll stop complaining in a minute once we make this dynamic. At the moment, this is a fixed number. Okay, so that's looking a little bit better. Now, one of the issues here is, let's say the date was on the 7th of the month. It's not very squashed, so it is very squashed up. So within our container, let's put some padding first of all, and set that to be const edge inset all 8. That's a bit better. And I want it to be spread out a bit. So within our row, we're going to set our main axis alignment to main axis alignment space between. That spreads it out a little bit. But I want these boxes to be square, and I always want them to be square. So the way we can do that is within our container here in our date box, we're going to wrap that in a widget called aspect ratio, and we're going to set the aspect ratio to 1, which means it's going to be square. But that's going to cause us a few issues, and the first issue that the whole thing has just disappeared, and that's because it's unconstrained. These date boxes are unconstrained. If you remember, this row is within a column, so we need to wrap this row in another widget called sized box, and we need to specify a height, and I think around 60 might do, and that brings our boxes back, and this time they're square. Okay, and increasing or decreasing that number will decrease the height of the boxes, and because they've got an aspect ratio of 1, it'll also keep the width the same as well. Next, we don't want 7 in them, we want the dates of the conference, so we need to pass that into the widget. So let's have a final string, and we'll call it text, and we're going to need to pass that in, and it needs to be required. So we'll do required this dot text. So now these up here are complaining because they haven't got a text. So let's set text to be let's do two 1-digit numbers and 2 2-digit numbers, so 8, 9, 10 and 11, because those are the dates of the conference. Save that, and nothing happens because we're not using it yet. So let's take here and change that to the text, and now we have our numbers in place. The other thing that it looks like is one of them is orange, because that's presumably the active one. Maybe it's the day that we're on, maybe it's the one that the user has selected. I'm not sure yet, but we need some way of setting that up. So let's, in the date box, also do a final boolean called active. Now active, I just put a comma here, so throw this on a new line. Active isn't going to be required, but I'm going to set it to false by default. So if we don't provide an active, it's going to be false. Now on the 9, we will put active to true. Okay, and then we just need to format that. So what changes? Well, the color here, at the moment we've got grey, but if it's active, it's going to be orange. So let's put here active. If it is, we're going to have appcolors.orange, otherwise appcolors.grey. Save that. And the other thing is the text color then. So again, exactly the same, active, question mark. If it is, we're going to have appcolors.grey, otherwise colors.white. And that has set that up. Okay, these are all constant values for now. They won't be later because that might change, but for now, stop it complaining, we'll put a const in there and make all that constant. All the other errors are gone, so we can save our date row and we're done. Okay, there's our date row. What comes next? Well, next we've got some text which says agenda, so let's put that in. Text agenda. And this text I think we are going to be using in other places. So I'm going to come back to the const.dart that we set up earlier and create a font. So static const, and for now I'm going to call it headline 1, and that is going to equal a text style, and it's going to have a font size of 38, a font weight of W900. Let's put this onto another line, and the color is going to be appcolors.primary, and I'll just save that. So let's come back to our home.dart, and in here we can simply now put style is going to be app fonts headline 1. Okay, again we can put const up here for now just to get rid of these underlines. We might need to take that off after. So saving that looks okay, but it's incentered, so we need to take our column, we put our cross-axis alignment to cross-axis alignment start, and that will shift that over. And between the two, I think we want to put a bit of spacing in, so I'm going to put a sized box with a height of 12. Let's see how that looks. Might move that a little bit more later, we'll see. Anyway, after the word agenda, we then want our agenda, and I'm going to make another widget for that, which I'm going to call agenda. Okay, as before, in our widgets folder, in our home screen home widgets, new file, agenda.dart. In here we're going to create a stateless widget called agenda and bring in our material. Okay, now this is the part that needs to be different based on the state. So we're going to need our block builder in here, because that is what looks and watches the block for changes in states and rebuilds the widget if the state changes. So the state we're looking for here is our home page qubit rather than a block. We need to import that, and we also need to import Flutter block. Why is that not having it? Okay, I don't know why that's not doing it, but we can import it. Import it manually. Okay, so with this now we have this builder which has the context and the state, and based on that state we can do something. So we can say in here, if state is homepage initial, i.e. if we're in the loading, then let's just return a circular progress indicator, and that's going to be a const. Okay. Else, if state is homepage loaded, we're going to do something, and we need to have an else down here just to keep this happy. At the moment it will be saying that it might complete without a widget returning. So we're just going to return a size box or a container, doesn't really matter, but we need to return something. It's still complaining, but that's because there's nothing in there. Okay, so we've got these three states. If the state is homepage initial, we're going to have a circular progress indicator. If it's homepage loaded, we're going to do something. else return a sized box. This should never happen. If that happens, something badly has gone wrong. The reason why we can't just do else here is that unless we've wrapped it in this thing, autocomplete doesn't know. If we type state here, we can see that it's got props, but we can't access the events. If we put events, it's going to give us an error. Whereas here, because we've said is the home page loaded, within there we can say states and we can access the events, which is what we need to do. Okay, so what are we going to do here? We're not going to return a size box. We're going to return a list view builder. And a list view builder is basically a list of widgets that are in a scrollable box. So the item builder is what we want to return for each of the items in the list view builder. So in our case, once the state is loaded, we know at the moment there are 3 entries in the database, so we should get 3 items built. So we also need to tell it the count, and the count is going to be the state events length, how many in, i.e. our 3 events. What are we going to return from here? Well, I'm going to create another widget which I'm going to call an event card, and to that event card I'm going to pass an event, and the event I'm going to pass is state events at index that we're currently at. Okay, so the list view builder in our case is going to be making 3 event cards, and the first one is going to be, the index is going to be 0, second one the index is going to be 1, third one index is going to be 2, and that's going to take our event at that index of our list and pass it to our event card. Let's create our event card. So again, we're going to have a stateless widget called event card, and we know we're going to be passing in a final conference event which we're going to call event, and we're going to pass it in here, and it's going to be required this event. Okay, now instead of returning a container, let's just return text with the event.title as a test and save that. Now we've got some errors on our home page. We just need to make sure we import the agenda from our widgets there, and that's the error gone, but it still isn't going to work. And if I save this now, we'll get a big red error message saying that we can't find a provider for the homepage qubit. So we need to provide it. Within our agenda here, we're trying to consume it, but we haven't provided it. And we're going to provide it on the home screen because it's the only place it's going to be used. And so with our scaffold, we're going to wrap that with a block provider. And the block we're going to provide is the home page qubit. Okay, let's see if, yes, Flutter block can now be imported. This is complaining because it's expecting something. What's it expecting? Well, it wants the repository. If you remember on the home page qubit, we set it up to take in the conference repository. So where are we going to get the conference repository from? Well, we need to also provide that somewhere. I'm going to do that in main. In fact, I'm going to provide it here outside our material app. I'm going to wrap that with a repository provider. And again, repository provider is part of Flutter block, so we need to import that. And the subject repository is going to be our conference repository that we created in the last episode. So when this app is run, or at least when something within our app first calls on the conference repository, it will be created, and it will be created once, and everything else will access that. While we're here, let's just put in a const there to stop that. And same here, just to get rid of those blue underlines. But this is the important bit. We're now providing our conference repository. Okay, if we're providing it, we can now access it here, and we can access it here by doing context read, and that's all we need to do. This knows that it's going to be reading a type of conference repository, so it's going to read that for us. We can be explicit, we can put in here conference repository, but it doesn't matter. If you typed everything properly, we don't need to do that. So it's going to look up the tree, look up our widget tree, up the context, and it's going to find wherever our conference repository is provided and provide that into our homepage qubit. Let's save that, and let's do a refresh, because only when the qubit is first loaded does the constructor run and load events. Okay, now we've got another problem, and that is nothing showing up. And again, it's a size problem because we've got a list view builder inside a column, and that can cause issues. It doesn't know how big it needs to be. We can fix that very easily by wrapping our list view builder inside an expanded, and that will give it the size information. And there we go, there are our event cards showing up. So all we need to do now is format these event cards and make them look a little prettier. Okay, so instead of returning a text, I'm going to return a stack, because we're going to need a few things in here. A stack takes children, and it stacks things one on top of the other. So the first thing is going to be at the bottom of the stack, the second thing's on top of it, so on and so forth. So the first thing we want to do is get a container, and we want to set a height here, and let's try 180 and see where we go with that. We want the width of our container to be double infinity. That basically means as wide as possible within the constraints it's got. And we're going to need a decoration on it, which is going to be a box decoration. So box decoration, looking at our design, we're going to have a border radius, and that's going to be a border radius circular of 14 according to the design. And we're going to have an image here as a background. So we're going to have a decoration image. Decoration image takes an image, and we're going to get the image from the network, but we want to cache it so that we're not hitting the website continuously getting the same image. So that was where one of the packages we installed comes in, and that is a cached network image provider in this case, because the image here, I don't know if you saw that, needs to be an image provider. So we're using a cached image network provider. Let's just see if we can format this a little bit. Okay, so what is the image? Well, it's going to be the event image. And if we save that, there we have our three images. But we want the image to take or fit the whole box. So we can do that within our decoration image. We can specify a fit as box fit cover and save that. There we go. The images are now resized to take up whatever size is needed to fill the space. Okay, that's the first item. The next thing we have is a container at the bottom which has the details here. So let's put in a container. Okay, so the container is going to have a decoration and it's going to have a box decoration. It's going to have a color, app colors, light gray, also a radius of 14 as well. What do we want in this box? Well, we're going to want to put in there as a child a row, because we've got these two elements on the left and we've, the title and the speakers, and we've got this button on the right. I'm going to ignore that button for now, but I want to put in the code so we can deal with it later on. So we're going to put in a row, and in that row the first item is going to be a column, and that's going to have some children, and the children are going to be text, and the text is going to be the event title, and the second bit of text is going to be the event speakers. Let's take a look at that. Okay, we need to create a few more fonts now, I think. So let's come back to our constants, and I'm just going to copy this headline 1 and paste it in twice more, and I'm going to call the next one headline 2 and the next one subtitle. Right, so headline 2 is going to have a font size of 20 and a font weight of bold, and the color is going to be the primary color, and our subtitle is going to have a font size of 14, a font weight of W300, which is light, and I want the colors of that to be colors.black. Save that. Okay, I think that's all we need to do in the constants for this episode. So let's come back up here and set the style of our title to be appfonts.headline2, and the style of the speakers to be appfonts subtitle. Take a look at that. Yeah, it's looking better. Let's take our column and set the cross-axis alignment to cross-axis alignment start. That'll stop it being centered. And around the whole container, I think we're definitely going to need some padding here. Let's try some padding. Const edge inset all. Let's try 8. Okay. So that looks okay, except for the fact it's not at the bottom. It's at the top, and we want it at the bottom. So let's take our container, control dot, wrap with widget, and the widget is going to be positioned. And what we can do in the positioned is set bottom to 0, left to 0, and right to 0. And that will make sure that it will always take the full width of the container it's in and be positioned at the bottom, 0 pixels from the bottom. And we're done. I want a bit of spacing now between those. And there's a couple of ways of doing that, but one of the quickest ways is coming back up to this list view builder and changing it to a list view separated. A list view separated takes an item builder, but also a separator builder. And within that separator builder, we're just going to return a const sized box height of 20. And that will put a space of 20. Now doing that, I don't know if you can see on the screen, but right at the very bottom here, you can just see the picture poking through. And I don't like that. So in our positioned, I'm just going to come and set the position to -1. And that will just knock our box down 1 pixel more and get rid of that ugly line that was there. And that looks a lot better. Okay. We've got our scrolling box working. It all looks good. We might need to take the padding out of the bottom of it actually, but we'll deal with that after. So the final thing we want as well in here is the start and the end time. So I'm going to put in another positioned, and the child for this is going to be a container. And let's just put in all our commas and format it. And the container is going to have padding, const, edge inset, all 6. It's going to have a decoration, box decoration, and we're going to have a color, colors.white, it's going to be a white box, and border radius circular of 10. Okay, and then within that we're going to have, not within the decoration, but within the container, we're going to have a child, which is going to have a column. Column is going to have the children, and the children are going to be text event start and text event end. Save that. That's okay, it's just in the wrong place. So in our positioned, we're going to move it 8 down from the top, if I can actually type 8, and 8 in from the right. And that's moved that to the right place. Okay, we've got no blue squigglies in there, so I'm happy with that. Let's come back to our home page. Haven't got any blue squigglies here, so we're good there. I'm going to put in a size box of 12. Oops, wanted to copy that. Underneath the agenda, just put a bit of spacing in there, and maybe change this from 12 to 24, maybe. And then the padding, we've got edge insets all 16. I think I want to change that to only top 16, left 16, right 16, and nothing at the bottom, so that our list comes all the way down to the bottom. Okay, so that's it. We've managed to get this page. No, it's not complete yet. I'm sure there's lots more we're going to do on this page, but it's as the design says. So we can now continue working forward and doing the next part, which I think we might look at authentication next time, because that's going to require a little bit of work on both the server side and the Flutter side. So folks, if you've enjoyed, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. It does help me out. Until then, don't forget to hit the notification button to be notified when the next episode comes out, and we'll see you then. Take care, folks. Bye now.